Juan, thank you so much for coming today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
We've talked behind the scenes quite a bit already, and it's been great to hear some of your stories. I mean, so many different things going on in your lives. Big event that you told me about. Just a lot of cool things, and I'm really excited to share this story, and I think the audience is going to be excited to hear it. So you want to dive into a little bit about who you are, what you do, and all those good things?
Sure. All right. So first of all, I know you said, hello, Juan. I go by Zulu. And the reason why, my last name is Zuluaga. Juan's, you say Juan, probably 10 people turn around here in Miami, right? So, and just like you, I served in the military. Nobody could pronounce my last name. So Zulu, that's why I identify myself with Zulu, because of my last name, Zuluaga. My daughter thinks my name is Zulu as well. So
that's great.
But again, thank you very much for having me. First, I wanted to tell you how much I applaud what you're doing. I met you, to give some context, I met you at an open house of a beautiful house in Pinecrest, 7865 Southwest 125th Street. My memory's terrible, but I remember that property because it was built by one of the most iconic architects that Miami has, which is Brillhart. As a matter of fact, he used to be an architect master teacher at UM. So a lot of people, every time that I hosted an open house there, this house attracted, the audience should look it up, 7865 Southwest 125th Street, because on an acre, it had a 70-foot, do you remember the property?
It was so beautiful. Like there was a pool in the middle.
A 70-foot pool.
And it went all the way around.
Correct. And a tree house.
It was
real
crazy.
Tree house with a zip line.
Absolutely. Yeah, that house was insane.
So, so the house, it attracted a lot of like architects and people like you. And I remember when I met you, I remember thinking you showed up with your girlfriend. And I remember thinking, I saw you as a very young person. I'm like, hey, this gentleman, very young, and you're asking some very direct questions that I knew that you weren't there to buy the property, that you were just trying to like get some good info. The lot size, you asked me like who had, I think you were observing who was looking at it and like finishes and like the price point, because I remember the issue that the property had was that it was 3 streets away from being in the place where everybody wanted to be there. And
what is that, east of US 1? Or
they want to be south or north of 120th Street.
Okay.
And this house was 125th. And they also want to be, and when I say they, is like the prime,
Yeah, like the money buyers
exactly.
in Pinecrest.
Like you don't want to be that close to US 1. They want to be a little closer to, and so that was the only issue that the property had. Everybody said, this is unbelievable. I cannot believe that someone can create this. But just the location. That's how important it is in our line of duty, in our business, to understand the little details. Because on the address is Pinecrest, acre, architect Brillhart, 70-foot pool. But guess what? It didn't sell right away because the location that was 3 blocks away from the prime location. But anyhow, I remember you're at that point you had not purchased this house. Because ever since then...
That was like 3 years ago when I first got to Miami, and I was just trying to figure out like the landscape and how the realtors worked out here and all of those different things.
I think this was a year ago. Like you were at your end
this
phase.
was a year ago.
Yeah, you were at because remember you said, I'm purchasing
I was
a
just in
house.
training for 6 months.
It was a year.
2 years
for
ago?
the Zilla Warriors 7865 Southwest 125th, because it shows you the date that it was sold. So I think it was a year, maybe a little bit over a year.
Okay.
But because I remember you had mentioned at that point that because I thought that I said that you're young and that you're cocky. So that's why I remember, because my memory, because of the stuff that I've gone, we'll talk about it later. Like my memory is my short-term memory sometimes is not good. Like but I do remember thinking like, man, this is a young cocky guy. And at that point, I was also thinking about opening up my own brokerage.
Sure.
So I was evaluating who came in, because I'm like, I want this person to be part of my army.
Sure.
Like that was the mentality that I had at that point.
Sure.
And I remember thinking, dude, that you were sharp with what you were asking. I remember you had a very good looking girlfriend, which I'm sure she's like your wife now, I think, or something. And I'm like,
we just talked about ring. I got permission from our parents 2 weeks ago, and then we picked out a ring. So we're like,
good,
moving
man.
that direction.
Oh, hey, ask me about buying an engagement ring, because I have a good story, and it has to do with with real estate about the rings.
Well,
I bought for my wife.
You should tell it on this podcast here.
Really quickly, let me tell you. When I switched careers, so I did 20 years in the government, as I mentioned, 10 years with the Air Force and 10 years with the FBI Miami. And then I went through like a hiatus, or like, I'm not going to say a sabbatical, but I really kind of started to question my life at that point. I said, look, I keep hearing, if you like what you do, you don't work a day in your life. I'm like, that sounds beautiful, but how can you get to it? Everybody wants to be on vacation, even though I'm not. I like vacations, but it's not, I sometimes I feel that I live a good life that I don't need a vacation from it.
Sure.
So I'm not, but I'm like, I don't want the world to tell me what I have to do. I want to pick, what I'm doing. In that way, I get to attract like everything that I want. So for 1 year, every day, and this was right before I started with real estate, I would just let the universe tell me what to do. So, and I remember at that point I was following this guy. I started to like look up on YouTube people that I thought were interesting. So there was this guy, Casey Neistat. He lives in New York.
I know exactly who he is. Video creator.
Correct. So, and the guy back then had this little, not gimmick, but like his thing was that he would create a 1 minute video every day that he told himself, you know what? I'm going to create a video for like 3 years. Mm-hmm. And the whole time I was like, dude, this is crazy because, everybody says, they'll have a goal, right? Like, I want to run a marathon. I use this analogy all the time. I've never ran a marathon. I tell people, look, I was in a physically challenging career, special ops for 10 years, then the FBI, where they would even pay me to work out. But never in my life have I ran more than 6 miles. And the 6 miles that I ran was one time when I was like heartbroken and I just took off running from Brickell and I ran just because, but so never ran a marathon, and I've always wanted to. It's just that I don't have what it takes. Everybody wants to do it, but I don't want to stop eating. I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. and run on Saturdays and Sundays and then, fight with my mind whenever my body's giving out after 13 miles or whatever, or 20. So this guy, I was at awe that he committed himself to do a video, what many people could consider cheesy, because it was just like about like New York or whatever he thought was interesting. That's obviously I thought it was interesting. This was like in 2017. And so I got inspired by that. And I was like, you know what, let me get to know my city a little better. And at that point, I said I had just finished my tenure with the FBI. I was living in Miami Shores, but before that I lived in Brickell, I lived in the Roads, Shenandoah. So I had seen, Shenandoah was the big eye opener for me, which is not that far from here.
Super close, just east.
Yeah, because you're like, unless you live here, you're like, this is too close to Cayocho. Nothing wrong with Cayocho, but you're like, you live in Miami, you want a sexy place, I don't know, like Coconut Grove or something. So living there, I bought the house by default. I remember when I told myself that, you know what, I'm done living the Brickell life and enjoying life. I need to, buy a house. I remember I called my realtor back then was helping me, and she asked me to like pick 10 properties. It's kind of me like right now asking you like, can you tell me your favorite 10 songs? No, your top 3. After that, you're probably like making it up, or even meals. So I was like, you know what? After 5, I'm like just started to like put stuff there, and obviously, and at that point, this was in 2012. I was like, you know what? I'm using a VA loan. I have good credit. It should be easy. And every property started to get taken off the table, over asking, blah, 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 to the point that, okay, top 5, nothing. And then I started to go to these other ones that I just never, I put them there on the list, but never did I really consider it. And I ended up with a shack, basically. Literally, this was like a shack.
Like a 2-1 in Shenandoah?
No, but not just that. Like, nothing wrong with having your washer and dryer outside, but it just, I go from my beautiful, I used to live in Brickell on the river, on second to last floor, beautiful view. And then I go to this house that I remember I moved in, wash and dry outside. Oh, this is the funny part. So I go there like the day before we close to show it to like my father. And there's someone living in the house. We're like, what? And it's this attractive lady. So the whole point, and I'm saying this for a reason, so you have some context. So it turned out that at that point, remember that a few years before, a lot of houses had gone in foreclosure. So I'm sure like squatters, it was just easy for someone to just like, see a house empty for like 2-3 years, just like move in. So, but there was like this thing going on there that people like squatters would move in, and you would think a squatter's like a bum, but no, this was a good-looking lady with her family. And there was all girls. And to the point that, we're like, wait, I'm closing on this house tomorrow. She's like, oh no, I signed a lease. Here's the lease. But the lady was, she seemed vulnerable and she was attractive, that you didn't feel that you could be aggressive and be like, what are you doing here? This and that, da-da-da-da. We call the cops. This is how good looking this lady was. The cop goes, talks to her and tells me like, hey, look, they got tricked. It's up to you. I'm like, what? It's up to me. Get him out of there. But and there were squatters and they had like a fake lease and blah, 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 blah. So anywho, the whole point of this story, let's we need more than a podcast, so I'm just going to try to like squeeze things in. But so the thing is that when I got that, because the whole point is about the ring.
Okay.
So and I was trying to mix it with how I got into real estate. So anyhow, I got this my last option, terrible house, deplete all my 401k TSP just to be able to get this house going. I got
Wait, you said you depleted all your TSP?
Yes. And so remember, I used the VA loan, so I didn't have to put money to buy the house, but I got the house in terrible condition.
So the TSP is this thrift savings plan, and that's what a lot of people invest in as a retirement plan if they're in the military, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you had built up X amount of dollars in your TSP by investing, and you said, no, screw this. I'm going to take all my money from that and get into real estate.
Yep. And
why would you make that decision? Because I feel like so many people are against that decision. Right?
Okay, so many things. For 20 years, I lived again a life where it was very constant. I knew exactly how much I was going to make, and at the end of the year, when I filed my taxes, I got something back. Maybe if I got a bonus, or maybe if I did a deployment, I would get extra money. So with that, I was deploying money, but I knew how much I was making, so I knew how much I could spend, how much I can put in the TSP, and I got kind of seasoned into that lifestyle, and I thought that's what you had to do up until you retire, and then you live off of what you had there. But then I started to when I purchased this house is because I've been very lucky throughout my life. I have come across good mentors, like organic mentors, not like, oh, there's the school teacher or this and that, or while I was in the military, I met some really good mentors, but through life experiences, I've come across, because usually you would think a mentor is like, Mr. Miyagi, like master, blah, blah. No, just like I'll give you an example. Like you could be a good mentor. Like the reason why I'm here is because the impact that you caused when I met you was strong enough for me to start following you. And I'm like, hey, I kind of like what he's doing, and that you lead by example. Point in case, I remember that when I met you at that property, you were talking about that you liked the lot size and that this area, you were focused here, that you lived in an apartment in Brickell or somewhere nearby. And then we started to follow each other, and I saw that you purchased this home. I'm not going to say the price point because $2 million is just way too much money for a person in their 20s. But then I'm like, hey, he followed through, and because when you said what you were looking for, I'm like, there's no way, like. In this industry, I see things from, obviously rentals that are, I think the lowest rental that I've done is $875. And to this day, I have not been able to break the $10 million barrier, but I've done several properties in that price point. So, but what I'm saying is that I get to deal with people, correct, from all different walks of life. And I understand that for someone that is young, that has lived in Edgewater or Brickell, the next step is a home, and usually the price, because I see it so often, what they expect correlates to properties that are above $1 million. Usually like 1.5 is the number, because you still need to do a lot of things to it, and it's not acceptable for the attitude that, or what someone that's coming from like a 2-bedroom, living at the Plaza or 1060 Brickell or Skyline, whatever, is what they're expecting, right? Because now they're married and have a kid, or they just want a house. So I'm like, okay. And people, now they're making more money. Obviously things have changed drastically in the last, since COVID. So you're like, okay, you have this young guy, he makes $200,000 a year. So, he's doing well, extremely well. But then when you realize the cost of purchasing a home of that value, you're like, okay, I bought this house for 1.5. So the government saying that the property's worth, 1.2. 2% of that, $24,000. So your taxes, and you bought it from someone that had lived in the house forever, so they're paying, $5,000, exactly. And then your taxes go up to $24,000. You're like, wait a minute, just in taxes, I'm paying $2,000 just in taxes
a month.
Plus your insurance is an old house, this and that, flood zone, blah blah blah. $15,000. Because also, as you know, insurance policies in the last
think 20% increase yearly.
no, and also newer policies that are written in the last like it's not the same. Like you fall under a different category. So and now this is not even touching your mortgage, your primary, your mortgage and your interest. So when you're talking about a house of of $2 million, and I said you guys can do the math, but you're talking about some crazy money that someone that does extremely well, that has a very good salary, could be chewing more than what they
100%.
Exactly. So
house poor.
Correct. So whenever I met you and I saw a young guy, with his girlfriend, and you're like, yeah, I live in this, I think you told me a 1-bedroom or something, and then wanting to move to a house, I'm like, dude, he doesn't know what he's doing. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I guess he knows what he's doing, and I guess he's doing, he's doing it right. So that's why I'm here.
Sure.
And fast forward to all these things, so following Casey Neistat, getting to know the city. So every day I'm going, downtown, Calle Ocho, doing this, I'm not into bicycles, but I'm like, you know what? Let me get on a mountain bike and go to Key Biscayne and biking downtown and stopping at these little plazas. I'm like, man, our city it's got so much to offer than what people usually think. And I'm like, you know what? I need to do something with this. And I was like, you know what? Everybody that comes to Miami, because they know, like friends from high school, I grew up in even though I was born here, I grew up in Colombia. And so a lot of my friends, come and visit me and stay here, or people that I met in the military, so everybody's like, oh, what is there to do in Miami? Like the beach and the mall and Miami Beach. I'm like, no, man, I live here and I never do that. Like, back then I was like, I would go out, I don't know, paddleboarding at night, or going to Homestead to, like, we have vineyards there. They're not always, they're made from fruits, but like it's good stuff, or I don't know, you can do the eye dive or the skydiving that you do in the machine in Broward. There's a kart track. You can do the Brickell Run Club, which I'm like, this is so cool, the stuff that you can do. And I love motorcycles as my passion. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to connect these two. Everybody that I'm in with racing motorcycles, I got to meet a lot of international people that come here to use the circuits that we have. And I saw a potential inspired by Casey Neistat of showing everything that the city had. And I try to do that. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put this together where I'm going to show them the city. And then on the weekend, we're going to go race motorcycles at, Homestead, West Palm Beach, Georgia, Roebling, Jennings GP. And for someone that's a motorcycle racer, when you go to a track, it's kind of like dropping a kid off at a Toys R Us and be like, this is for the taking. And I'm like, dude, no, this is going to be perfect. And a friend of mine had an apartment in Brickell, and she moved and she said, Zulu, you know what? A beautiful apartment. And she said, I'll rent it to you for $100 a day. And it was a 2-bedroom, furnished, to help me out, obviously. And I was like, this is perfect. Not only they're saving money everywhere, I'm showing them the best that you can live like a local. It's kind of like, I've never been to Japan. Imagine someone's like, dude, we're going to take you to like the local sumo wrestling, then the guy that catches the fish and does the sushi, and then you're going to be praying here. I'm like, dude, sign me up. I want to see how locals live. So I'm like, this is perfect. And then on the weekends, we would go do the motorcycle racing. I connected with a racing team, so I would bring the motorcycles all with me to the track, follow these guys, record them. Like, it was like VIP service. But at the end of the day, there was no money in it. Like, people were like, how much is this?
Filming or videography?
Yeah. People are like, how much is this costing? And the whole time, like, I gave everything here. And instead of being, because cost and value, that's something that I know very well. Like, if the value's there, you pay it. If you're focused on the cost, you're doing the wrong thing on anything. Real estate, hiring the realtor, like, it's so many things. So at that point, I'm like, you know what? Your passion cannot be your way of life. It's just like, then I felt that I was not following if you like what you do, you're not working a day in your life. And I was depressed, not depressed, because at that point, my wife was my rock, man. She just she never said like, hey, you're 37, you have a mortgage, she was my girlfriend at the time. She's like, go find a job, She never made me feel like that. I wake up
like
in the
you
mornings,
weren't accomplished, or that you're like behind, or
I remember at that time, she even said, because she was living in Brickell, and then she moved in with me at the house in Miami Shores. She had a dog because it was just easier. You have a dog, living in an apartment sucks. The house, you just open up and obviously they go outside. There you go. So she was staying with me, and I always kind of kept that distance because I'm like, dude, I want to make sure that this boyfriend, girlfriend, I'm not ready to get married. And so at that point, you know, she was quasi living with me. She still had her apartment, but she would stay with me most of the time. But she's like, hey, look, let me take care of like the car insurance, like stuff, you know, real stuff, man. That you're like, man, my girlfriend is like, it was.
She's contributing.
Yeah, but it was
That's
like
amazing.
like like on paper it's embarrassing, but I'm like, this is cool that this person is not telling me like, you know, fill in your shoes, you know, just
Yeah.
you know, you're an adult. And every day, again, I would go out, film, have experiences, and I love filming and taking pictures. I tell everybody I'm the worst photographer and videographer, but I capture the moment, dude. Like before phone, you know, because now phones are so capable. As a matter of fact, we're filming on a phone. Yeah,
Crazy.
exactly. So look how cool this is. And obviously, if you hire a company, we would have a camera that looks like a elephant's trunk, just filming. There's a big lens, but now,
Yeah.
so back then, you know, I would bring my GoPros everywhere. I would put like GoPros on my head, on the bicycle, motorcycle, wherever I was at. You know, the stabilizers, using the drones. I've been using drones for a very long time, before they became popular, you know, 10 plus years ago. And so I would put all these stories together, like kind of like Casey, which was cool. I did it for me, but somehow it attracted other people. And realtors, a few realtors, I'm not saying too many of them, but you know, more than one at least. They're like, hey, we like what you're doing with this drone and with these cameras. Can you take pictures and make a video of this property? And I'm like, sure. At that point, I was still working for the FBI. Matter of fact,
Sure.
when they started to pay me for that.
Sure.
But, you know, obviously I was able to hone in that skill of, you know, trying to edit a little bit here and there after my year hiatus. But I started to get hired when I was still with the FBI. Like, you know, I'm like, yeah, go take a few pictures here and there and make, you know, a few $100. I'm like, this is cool, you know, because I do it for fun.
100%.
And the value was that I felt that someone liked a skill that I had. I'm like, because even till to this day, I tell everyone that ask me about, you know, that they feel that I'm doing well in life, you know, in real estate. Especially during the pandemic, people would call me like crazy when the pandemic really hit, because they were going, you know, bankrupt. You know, there's no business. They're like, Zulu, you know, they would ask me like, we see that you're happy with what you're doing and that you're doing well. And I told myself, I'm going to help everybody that I can. I'm going to be really not just giving this elevator speech. I'm going to actually tell them, you know, more than what they want to hear. And I would tell people two things. Look, if what you're doing is you're chasing money or freedom of time, not having a boss, then I can't help you, because that's not what works for me. I have like 50 bosses. Anybody that trusts me is my boss, and I never focus on the money. Like I said, it's tough to say that I treat the rental of $800 the same as the $10 million property. But you know what? I want to say that I'm true to that, and I give, you know, if I'm with you all the way, no matter what it is.
Do you think that's something you learned in the military and the FBI?
100%, 100%. It's funny because like, so you're from the Army and I'm Air Force. So Boy Scouts almost basically, but it's a completely different.
He's got the best situation. I got the worst situation. That's the joke in the military.
And you know what? So you're right. And you know, sometimes when I would deploy, I would be bitching on the plane, because I remember one time it was a New Year's Eve, and we're in Afghanistan. The plane that I used to fly in was a non-pressurized plane, because it has a bunch of weapons on the side. You can't pressurize it. So it was the winter in Afghanistan. So inside of the plane, it was in the back of the plane, it was negative 35 degrees. At least I was in the front where I can, you know, in the booth where I had some type of heating, but still it was freezing. I felt terrible for the gunners in the back. You know, those guys were literally wearing like Mustang suits because sometimes it would get negative 50. You know, it was so, you know, you're at altitude in the Hindu, you know, just terrible situation for them. And he were bitching because we're flying overhead, nothing's happening. And I'm like, let's go home. Well, home to the tent in Bagram. And but then the following day, or you know, weeks later, or whatever, when we would talk to the people that we were taking cover for, like that we were observing, because they were sleeping out there in the middle of a mountain. They're like, guys, look, we had been, the Army guys. They're like, we had been here for, you know, a week or two, scared shitless, because obviously in the mountains, you know, people can take cover, and the only way we could rest is by hearing the propellers of your plane, knowing that you got eyes on us, because obviously we're talking to them like, hey, we see, you know, 15 sleeping bags here, blah, blah, blah. And they know that we have eyes on them. So the whole time I'm like, here I'm bitching because it's cold and it's New Year's and what am I doing in life? But there's someone down there sleeping in a sleeping bag, negative, and the snow, probably, thinking that they're going to get shot, that their girlfriend's back at home, celebrating New Year's with someone else. But, so I'm like, dude, I can't bitch. So anyhow, you do, all this background teaches you a lot of things. And what I was saying is that, Army completely different from us. Like my deployments were much shorter because of many, like we would tap out in the hours that we could, because the job that we did, they wanted you to be 100% mentally focused because, if we would engage the wrong people, then, people were dying.
So you were flying AC-130?
An AC-130 gunship, yes. Spectre gunship, very proud whoever seen it, 16th SOS. But yes, yeah. So yes, it's.
And you have how many deployments?
5.
Five
deployments.
deployments.
4 in Afghanistan and 1 in Uzbekistan, because the war at first, when it first started, we didn't have the base, but we couldn't land in Afghanistan, so we were deploying out of Uzbekistan, doing the missions in Afghanistan and coming back. So
Okay,
yes.
that's crazy. Yep. So we got 2 wildly different experiences, because I'm like 6 months in, just out of training, and here you are 10 years in active service, and you have 5 deployments. So it's really cool to sit down with somebody who has done what you've done in the military, and you say what you say about the military. You got some cool stories and whatnot. So it's really cool to sit down with you.
Thank you. And you know what? And likewise, because, so I want to say that up until probably 5-6 years ago, I felt still very connected, that I understood everything that was happening from the technology, because after I flew in even though it's the frame of that plane is from 1969, but the internals of it, everything is new. The technology is new. And then with the FBI, also I worked in the electronics field. So all the technology, like I was very up to date. But now I feel that obviously years have gone by. Like even with what just happened with the incident where they attempted to assassinate the former president, the whole time I was like, look, I've been in the same scenario where we were in situations where, like, I don't know, like the Super Bowl here in Miami, at that point I was with FBI and we were doing the surveillance in there. So I knew, obviously we're, not to get too much into detail, but where, the different, eyes on certain targets, the snipers and how the communication worked, that whenever I saw what we saw in the news, I'm like, there was such a lack of, I'm not even going to put any words into it, but I was completely disappointed on how things work, because I'm like, if I know how this works at a much smaller scale, which obviously, what happened was just atrocious. And even to this day, I said, we won't get too much into it, but I'm like, I cannot believe that more people have not been responsible. Like
Sure.
Heads haven't been chopped off. Like it's just very, even from my standpoint, I'm like, it's very clear who should be tried or
Put on trial
fired,
for,
you name it. But anyhow, let's not even get into that. But anywho,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, our background does help us not only understand each other, but also kind of like guide the way that we conduct our business nowadays.
Sure.
And we still have not even addressed the ring portion. Whenever I was lucky enough that people started to like hire me for putting a story together via video and pictures, I said to myself, you know what? I like this lifestyle, but at that point, I didn't want to become a realtor. I thought what realtor meant to me was not what I wanted to be. Nothing wrong with it. I tell people nowadays, I'm like, look, I'm not a realtor. I'm a real estate advisor. I like to listen to what your mission is and give you advice. And more times than not, I've either done it myself, or I've seen the person that's renting the $875 property or the person that is buying or selling the $10 million property do it, or be advised by someone that's giving him, good info. So more times than not, I've done it myself. One of my clients has done it, or I've seen it, and I've seen it done right. So I give good inputs. I like to tell myself that.
Sure.
and hopefully everybody's done a Zillow review. I don't have that many, but I should be asking more for it. I see people with gazillion, they're like, wait a minute, I do a lot more deals than you do. But anyhow, so so at that point, I'm like, you know what? I want to dive into this real estate thing, because remember that the only constant in my life at this point is real estate. So 10 years, I'm 21 years old. I use a VA loan to buy a house. I'm like, wow, I'm 21 and I got a house, a brand new house. Never in my life that I thought a 21-year-old, and with my financial circumstances at that point, living paycheck to paycheck, enlisted man, just 21, and boom, here I buy one. with a VA loan. Then I get another property because obviously I had enough equity on that, and I bought an investment property. At that point, I was 25. At that point, different rank, more bonuses, a lot of deployment, so you get tax-free
Still
money.
nothing crazy though. That military pay is like, it's
But-
okay. It's nothing crazy.
Correct. So I remember, you know what? I remember to this day when I joined in 1998, my first paycheck was $200. $200 for 2 weeks worth of pay. But that's when you're like, at first they don't pay that much when you're living on the base and going through boot camp. But still, like my paychecks, they're very low. But then I was very lucky that after the war and when I became a flyer, I got a really good bonus. I got a $90,000 bonus.
There you go.
And
Enough
but
to
this
get
was
started.
a commitment for, I forget how many years. I had to commit like 6 or 10 after that
Sure.
because they had put so much training into
Sure.
being able to do the job that I was doing on that aircraft.
The military's run like a business. I don't think a lot of people understand that. Like when you get a bonus, if you don't finish your contract, you owe that bonus back actually.
Correcto.
So like a lot of people think, oh, the military, this, that. It's a business. It's a company essentially. And it's kind of, they take into consideration a lot of things like that.
Absolutely. And even I saw the difference. Like when I first joined, nobody had a say into that. A colonel said something, that's what was going to happen. Like, and then it became a little softer. Is that the term? I don't know. But at least they would consider certain things, right?
Sure.
Because remember, when I joined, people couldn't even be gay. There was a don't ask, don't tell rule. So, and then they started to allow gay people. Then now there's a transgender general. Then females couldn't be in certain positions. In the story I was telling you earlier, that I remember one of a training mission that I was doing once, right before I got out. I remember flying on that plane, and there was a female in every position on the plane, including gunner, loadmaster, which are more like physical, the pilot, everybody was a female on that plane. It was a training mission, so we had 2 of everything, 2 pilots, 2 co-pilots. But I'm like, everybody's a female but me at that point.
You were the only male on the plane.
Correct. So a lot of things that obviously we progressed, right? But things have changed quite a bit. And so I saw a big change, not only in the military, but even when I joined the FBI. I remember the first director, Robert Mueller. He was the director when I joined the FBI. And I remember the first meeting that we had with him. He would come, not often to Miami, but he would bring everybody in from that was with the FBI division, and he would talk about important topics. And I remember when he first started that meeting, I remember like if it was today. If you're in the FBI in Miami when did I join? 2009, 2010. You'll remember this. The guy was like, okay, whatever. Da, da, da. He's like, I just want, and he was giving us bad news about something. I think the government was broke back then. Something had happened. They were cutting something, and he said. He was not apologetic, which that's what I like. Very direct, not like, oh, this is the, no. He said, this is what's going to happen, and I hope that everybody here understands that first comes the FBI, then second comes FBI, and then third comes FBI, and then comes you. And you know what? As bigoted, as whatever word you want to use, whatever synonym of an a-hole, he got straight to the point, and to be honest, that's what had to happen. People there was no room to bitch, complain. And at that point, I had trust in that man that whatever he was saying didn't work for me, obviously, but that's what had to be done in order to accomplish the mission. And then towards the latter part, I had Comey. There was a big, obviously he was all over the news because he got fired from the FBI. But I do remember then at that point we had moved our headquarters to Broward. And he came for like the inaugural opening, and I remember thinking like he's a nice guy, like he was very very articulate, but a nice guy. And I consider myself a very nice guy, but earlier we were talking about certain things that I learned in the military, and one of the main things that I learned is to identify a leader. And as we had spoken before, like one of the traits that I got from the military is that if I have someone that is one rank below me, I will always try to guide and understand my place. But if I have someone that's one step above me, I'm not going to question it, and I'm also going to understand my place. So I know my place. That's the one thing that I learned, and I apply that every day with all my clients, with my friends, with everything in life. I know my place, and I'm okay with that. And I thought that with Director Comey, he was a nice guy, and I thought, personally that we needed someone more direct, that
Less fluff, straight to the point.
Correct.
Says it how it is.
Correct. So I said, I start to see these changes. I still have not talked about the ring, right? so anywho,
they're going to stay through this whole episode till they hear about the ring. That's what
I
we're
need
doing
to get to
here.
it now. So then fast forward, people hire me, and so identify good mentors, and follow people. So at that point, a mentor had told me about a certain area, a geographical location in Miami Shores that I was not aware of and that I didn't like it. This isn't appealing to me, and I ended up moving to that geographical location. And then that person develops, and when I started, so I said, look, I'm going to work as a realtor, and I joined a brokerage. A big broker, Keller Williams, because they had like a training program. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to make any deals. I just want to connect with people and learn and come from value. I didn't want to be the guy that's trying to guide. You saw people in the military, especially I think this is something that they teach you at boot camp. They give certain chores to you. Like I remember in the Air Force, we had to iron shirts or do our beds and drop a coin and make sure it bounced off of, so people were good at certain things, but you had people that were not that good trying to lead. And if you're not an expert at something, that you need to understand that and pass on baton to whoever is the expert, because you don't have time to lose.
Sure.
And so I told everyone, look, I will never expect. Obviously, you always want your people to pick you, but look, I understand, and I'm not, unless I can come from value. I don't want to be like, hey, why don't you pick me? Even though I want to do that, but obviously I was against what I was trying to portray.
Yeah.
And someone, said, you know what, we like what you're doing. We're going to give you a shot. And it was a very impressive property. So till to this day, I'm going to say, all in all, context and everything, my favorite property. It was called Villa Escondida. Look it up on YouTube. Is it on YouTube?
You made a YouTube video?
Villa Escondida. Huh?
Did you make a YouTube video about it?
Of course. In the house. So it's a house in Bellevue. Anyhow. So anywho, this property, so it was an honor that obviously the owner of the property said, they said, we're going to, give you a shot, but you only have a very finite amount of time because this is business. It's not charity.
Like a month?
Yeah. I believe exactly. They said, we're going to give you a month.
That's crazy.
And, but the nice thing is that I had a little head start because the property was not done. So I remember I said, okay, what do I have to do? And at this point, again, people weren't barely using, aerial photography, videography, putting stories together. So here, I bought the newest drone that I can get at that point, which was the Phantom 2. People that know that, they're going to know what it is. And, or the 3, one of those two. So, I bought a nice camera, special for that and all the stuff. And, but the thing is that I had the head start, and I also started to connect with everyone. I said, you know what? I need to call all the head honchos. I'm not going to put names out there because then...
Like the big realtors?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then they're not going to be happy. But I called every single one to tell them, look, I got this product that's coming out in this area, da-da-da-da-da. And I need to write a book one day about this because it was sad, and I could never get a hold of any of them. And I get it. It's like someone calling me, I get realtors calling me look, I got this and that. And
another realtor's calling me, yeah, I can see it on the MLS, all right.
Exactly. So I'm
I want to spend my time with clients, not you, realtor.
Exactly. So now I get it. But at that time, I'm like, I'm showing them something off market so special. I'm putting my heart and soul into this thing. And I can't even get a hold of them. I'm talking to all their secretaries and no calls back. I send them the video. Nothing's working. And but I learned so much from that. And long story short, I was able to successfully sell the house to a celebrity.
There you go.
A very important
all within
person.
a month.
But after it was done. And also learn so much from that. Oh my God. No, we need to do another podcast about 100%. Stuff that you learn the hard way on that property. I said, we went under contract. And back then, there was no such thing as properties of that value that are over $1 million before the pandemic. It would literally, statistically, it would take at least a year to sell, unless you were just giving it away, obviously. So the property went under contract in a very short amount of time, but the property didn't have the CO yet.
Certificate of occupancy.
But no, everything was perfect, a brand new construction. We followed everything to the T, but at the end of the day, there's a few trees that were moved. And but the alibi of the seller was like, look, the trees are on the property. We just moved them because they were right here. And like, oh no, we're gonna have to review this. So obviously a review, that's gonna be months. And this was a cash deal, multi-million-dollar property, celebrity, VIP guy buying it. And he's like, no, we can't, it had already been like 60 days and there was a cash deal. You could have closed it, 5 days after. So all these things with experience, and things that at that time seemed like it was the end of the world, but you truck through it, you get over it, you figure out a solution, and that kind of like catapulted my career. Because at that point I had done a few other properties before that were pretty decent, but that one like really like not only did it put Belle Meade on the map, but it made me feel like Superman because the people that had trusted me, the stuff that we went over, the blood, sweat, tear, and all the connections, and even the broker at that time that helped me, like all these things that really made a difference in that it was like a conglomeration of like everything that I had learned in life. Like, in your team, you need to have like good people, good connections, be humble, hard worker, be ready to roll up your sleeve when you have to and fight when you have to. So all that was a really good learning experience. Still have not gotten to the ring. So anywho, when I was working in real estate, so before I decided to do the full jump onto real estate, my girlfriend at the time helping me out, paying the car insurance, never said, hey, get a real job. And I said, look, if this isn't what a picture perfect wife is, I don't know what it is. But at that point, I had not contemplated getting married just because of my past. Like I joined the military when I was 17.
Sure.
We didn't have FaceTime back then. Like there was times where I spent in Afghanistan months without talking to my parents.
It's crazy in the military. The people, I feel like, how do I put this? You leave the people you love most, but they're the ones that bring you home. Like Correct. It's always hardest. Like why would you sign up to go leave the people you love only to miss them the most when you're gone? But they're also the ones you look forward to when you get back home. They almost get you through that whole experience.
And I said, I don't want to sound like a stalker, but because obviously I use Instagram. That's how you and I connected. Well, obviously meeting at the open house. I'm not sure. I wish you would tell me like how you found that house and how you went there to the house in Pinecrest.
Zulu open houses.
Okay. All right. So just randomly, not because Brill Hard or the type of property it was. It was a beautiful $6.5 million home.
Yeah.
So anywho, I remember, that you posted a story of like, I think your family went to see you when you graduated from boot camp. Because obviously that happened to me. That happened to me back in 1998. My parents driving to Texas, to San Antonio, Texas for graduation of boot camp, and how I felt. And obviously it's easy for you to like, to go back in time and think about like how things were back then. Like I remember then when you go to in the Air Force, it's called your tech school. I think for you guys it's called whatever it's called, like where you get to learn the trade that you're going to be.
AIT.
So in my case, like we went to these old World War II bunkers where you had to like live. We lived there for months while you went to school, and there was like one telephone, a payphone in the day room. So imagine like the biggest guy always was hoarding the phone, fighting with his girlfriend for hours. Here we are trying to call people collect because we had no money, like crazy stuff. But times change, right?
There was a guy in our AIT, and so we would have to pull fire guard, right? So we would go 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. It'd be an hour-long slot. There was this one gentleman on our floor that was always fighting with his girlfriend. Now, in our AIT, you had 3 people per room, so he had 2 other roommates. He's in the bathroom just screaming.
AIT like at college, and he's living in the dorms.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's just screaming in his bathroom. We can hear it all the way out in our hallway, and we know that his 2 roommates are they want to kill him. So
get one of those.
Talk about arguing with girlfriends. We experience a lot of that too.
So anywho, I decided to pick this field, and I didn't want to get married just because of all that time. That I'm like, you know what? I didn't get to live my late teens or my 20s like I should have. Like I'm sure like you probably did, or like most of the audience. How you live your 20s? I don't know, making mistakes, going out partying, crazy adventures. And I have mine in a different way, but I felt that I had to live that. So just in my mind, I was like, you know what? I still need to do all these things. And marriage always, like a true, real marriage, felt like like you're an adult and you have to do all these boring things, right? But I was like, you know what? I saw what she stood by me. She let me be the man that I wanted to be and always had my back, that I felt empowered. And I said, you know what, I need to marry this girl. But at that point, I had no money to buy a ring. But, so this is the funny part. Remember how I told you that I bought a house with a VA loan and I had liquidated all my TSP to fix a house. And when I sold the house, I had a nice chunk of change. And I reinvested all that money to buy another beat up house in Miami Shores. Then that's when I moved from Shenandoah to Miami Shores. But I told myself, I need to give myself, a prize. And I've always wanted a very specific motorcycle. It's a Ducati Hyper Motard. Like the last year that they made it was a 2011. The Air Cool, like a very manly motorcycle that Tom Cruise used in one of his movies.
I get the picture.
Yeah. So I was like, and I remember I'm like, dude, I bought that motorcycle on eBay, and like the craziest thing that, I should not have been doing, but I did it. So I was like my prized possession. I'm like, the whole world can burn up and this bike and me, this is all we need. We're going to be okay. And so, at this point I'm like, dude, I want to do this, but I financially I couldn't. I had a house, a mortgage, a car. I know what I was doing a whole year without making any money. And I'm like, you know what? I need to sell this motorcycle and use that money for the ring. So I put it on like Craigslist or whatever. And this guy from Netherlands understands how special this motorcycle is. He comes to my house and sees it. I literally cry. I'm not making it up. Like telling him like why I'm having to sell this motorcycle because I don't have any money and I want to buy a ring for, to present to my girlfriend. And he tells me, look, this is such a sad story that whenever you get back on your feet, you can buy this motorcycle back. Because that motorcycle, they stopped making it.
Sure.
And so I bought it. I gave the money to my mother-in-law. I'm like, hey, find me a ring. I talked to her, and that's how she got the ring, dude.
That's
I had to sell I never got the bike back. Sucks. But anyhow, that was the story. And I got married, like at the wrong time, because you would figure like to get married, I don't know, I want to have at least a place, or but at that point, I was not making any income. I was transitioning careers. But
I feel like there's no right time.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's the
for that
common
and for kids.
Theme. Exactly.
Yeah.
Dog.
So you can
kids,
delete
anything.
this part so your girlfriend doesn't see, or fiance or
No,
whatever sees
we're
it
leaving this in.
because she's gonna be like putting that on repeat. Like, hey, wait a minute, there's not a right time for kids. It's now. Yeah, but no, for sure, for real. Like, and if anybody wants to talk about that, because I tell people there's 3 things I feel comfortable talking about: marriage, kids, and boats. And the funny part, I say boats because everybody's like, oh, who is this guy? What does he think? And it's not because I've had it, but I've always, when I was in the military, very young, I lived in I tell people Pensacola because that's like the most known city, but it's a small town called Fort Walton Beach and Destin, which is a little beach town. So it's around the beach, around the water. And I also wanted a boat really bad. And I bought this small little Sea-Doo, 0 down, financed it like at a gazillion years. But I realized that, you know what? You don't need to have this, it's an amazing way to get to enjoy the area where you're at. Or even when I moved to Miami, same thing. I bought a boat and then I got it with like 2 people. And then I had a boat with 3 people. Then I realized like, look, you just want a mean, it doesn't have to be a boat. It can be a jet ski, it can be a paddleboard, like means to get out there. But in your mind, you're like, oh, this is expensive. I need to have this, a house, no, you go for it. So when I tell people that, I'm like, okay, so I realized that the best boat to have is the one that doesn't give you any headaches and that lets you enjoy, going out there, seeing a sunset or a sunrise in the morning on your boat. You're like, so the one that doesn't give you headaches. So what's a headache? That's expensive. It's marinas, that's breaking down. So like the one, so whatever works for you. And then marriage and kids, because for marriage, I always thought I needed to have this and that, but no, dude, like, as long as you have someone that supports you, that lets you be who you are and empowers you to be a better person. And then the kids, the same thing. You're like, oh, I want a house or this job. No, dude, like my daughter, my wife told me, from the beginning, like, I want to get married and have kids. I'm like, dude, I can hold back on this. And then the kid thing, I'm like, I can really, really hold back. And then I didn't even know if I could have kids or not. And, but then, she's like, let's try to have kids. I'm like, oh shoot, this is scary, but but it turned out the biggest blessing. Like, I'm not superstitious, but they just bring luck and they open up new doors for you. So it's never the right time, but just do it.
The connections you meet through school or whatever.
Oh my God. That's another podcast. That's another podcast.
I reached out yesterday to Ransom and Gulliver trying to get my feet wet volunteering like just trying to open that door. And it's such a process to open it because I'm not an alum or I don't have any family that's an alum. So I'm trying to tap into all these other connections, but I am so excited. And like one of the most consistent things I hear is there's never a right time, but the amount of opportunities and the love that you're going to have for them is unmatched.
Correct. 100%. But the best thing, or I guess part of how it worked out for me is to not have a playbook. Just go by ear. We are designed to procreate. Obviously, there's people that don't. My sister's.
They got to be lonely. I don't know.
Most amazing person, happily married, but she doesn't want any kids. So obviously, it's not everybody's. But I think we're made for it, because people obviously for the beginning of times have been doing it. So you just go for it, and as long as you have a good conviction, you're a hardworking person, and strive for the best, it'll work out. And in my case, and what I've seen, it brings you all the luck in the world because it just really pushes you, and it opens up. So with real estate, the reason why we're sitting here, networking, that's like the number one thing for me. I purposely, organically network. I don't reach out to people that I don't know particularly. Obviously, I've done it, but it's not what I tend to do. I tend to, I want to gravitate towards like-minded people or people that know certain things that I'm interested in, and it works that way best, because as I had mentioned earlier, there's two things. The Zulu motto is people that like you, listen to you, people that trust you, do business with you. And in order to to move from like to trust, it's tough, but once you're there, that's it. You're a pack. And that's what I want to get to the trust of on both sides, because this has happened to me that even recently I've lost, because everybody sometimes in this business thinks that everything, it's easy for you to do math on a realtor. You're like, oh wait, he sold this house for $1 million, so he made $30,000 in that. But there's so much to it, to the point where I've lost capital from deals. But you know what? That's part of, we're in this.
You're talking where you put in extra money and took zero out in order to get the deal
That
closed.
At the end of the day, I went in something thinking that I was going to come out on the positive, and I came out on the negative. It has happened.
Sure.
And but you know what? It's part of me understanding who I pick and them understanding who they're working with. So we both win at the end, even if the outcome is not coming out with a positive balance.
Sure.
So, but yeah, man, this is something that life, it has worked out so well, and that's why I wake up like a happy man. Like literally, I wake up feeling I have the same problems that everybody has. You name it. But I feel that I won the lotto, and again, I have the same problems, probably more problems than a lot of people, but I wake up happy. Very
That's
happy.
amazing.
That I'm where I need to be. And even from the beginning of this conversation, I remember thinking when I met you, I'm like, at some point I want to work with you. I even think that, how my memory's terrible, but now these things are coming back. I remember I said, look, I have a lot of off-market things. So if you want to work on the Upper East Side, if you need things up there in Belmead, Miami Shores, Biscayne Park, Morningside, call me. Because I remember at that time I was being strategic. I'm like, okay, young guy, millennials that's another thing, man. It's in my background. I hope people don't judge me, but I said, just think about where I came from, where don't ask, don't tell rule. Then females couldn't do this, then this and that. So I'm like, whoa, it's kind of like me judging a shark for biting the head off of another fish. I'm like, oh, how inhumane. Dude, that's what that shark knows.
To do, yeah.
Exactly. So, but I know better because obviously we're intelligent people, so we progress and we get better. But that's what I was exposed to. And then I lived in a third world country before where things are, even, we were talking about it earlier, that I remember my first deployment was during the winter. So not much activity was going on because it was snowing in Afghanistan. So everybody's hunkered down. So the people that I deployed with would ask me like, hey, how was it to, grow up in Colombia, in Medellin, in the 90s when Pablo Escobar, all the drug cartel things going on. And I remember, obviously to make the story interesting to my colleagues back then, to the airmen, I was like, you know what? There was more action there than it is here because, and they're like, what? How come? Like, you know what? 2 times in my life I woke up, and you guys that live in the 90s, that this is true in Medellin. the windows in my bedroom and in my house exploded because they would set up a car bomb to kill an acquaintance of Pablo Escobar or someone that had something to do with the drug cartel, and whether they don't have impact windows, all this stuff. So the shock wave would blow everybody's windows for a mile radius. And it didn't happen once. It happened twice. And all the time, like you couldn't, there was a curfew. You couldn't, and this is in a beautiful city. Because when I say these things, you're probably thinking like, oh, this guy lived in the desert or something, the jungle. No, we're talking about a city. You know what? I'm going to say that city is nicer. I love Miami. I'm infatuated, but it is nicer than Miami because it has
geographically and like the features
and architecturally, and there's because we're here in Coral Gables in a beautiful house, and I'm looking out your French doors, and I can see the foliage of those are. Don't tell me, I'm really good with plants.
This is all my girlfriend. So,
okay. All right, but anyhow,
actually, this segues. I really want to talk about this before you finish that thought. So, we had a party on Saturday, and my buddy got me this. I told him it was going to be in the next podcast. So, I don't know. Is this bamboo?
I think it's not this regular bamboo that we see, but I think it is.
Okay.
It is a bamboo.
Well, shout out Tom. Thank you so much. But it's cool because you can see like the roots and stuff down here. So this is a very thoughtful gift.
Very neat. That's cool.
But anyways, so yeah, the plants here are all my girlfriends, so I can't help you out there.
Areca palms. Those back there are called areca palms.
Areca palms.
So the whole time, like, this is how nice how we're in a. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a Spanish revival architecture of this house, mid-century.
1950s.
Okay. So it's the contrast is great. You have this architectural concept, and then you have the greenery back there. So in Medellin, the city, since it's in the equator, it's always spring, so everything blooms like crazy. It's kind of like, you buy an orchid, you're like, oh, it's so pretty, but like, 3 weeks later, like, oh, this thing looks terrible. Or there, it's always bloom time.